You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look at better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 7th part of What If Naruto Enters Total Drama Island. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Pixel's Fanbook on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Snap. There it is again. Trent says, after hearing another snap. The two become cautious of their surroundings as something rushes behind them, and Gwen hears it as she turns around, only to see nothing. What was that? Gwen asks, looking around for something. Did you hear that? She asks and Trent looks at her. What? Trent asks. Didn't you hear that? Gwen asks and Trent frowns in confusion. Hear what? Trent asks, wondering what Gwen heard. Like something was rushing past us. Gwen says as she continues to look around while she was stepping back, unaware of just where she was going. I swear I could have dash, she was saying before she stepped onto something and a spring went off as a net shoots from the ground underneath Gwen and wrapped her in it with the net was then pulled by a rope and Gwen was sent flying to a tree where she stops and is hanging off the ground in the net. Trent hears the commotion and turns to see Gwen in her trap. Gwen. Trent yells as he rushes over to Gwen and is in front of her in her trap. Are you okay? What happened? I'm fine. And I don't know what happened. Gwen yells. Did Chris leave traps out in the woods and never told us about them? Trent asks. I don't know and I honestly don't care. Get me out of here, Trent. Gwen frantically yells and Trent looks at the net holding her. Just relax, okay, I'll get you out of there in no time, I won't leave you in this. Trent yells. He grabs a section of the net and starts attempting to snap the ropes of the net one by one. But before he could snap another rope on the net, something shot out from the woods and wrapped around his body, causing the guitarist to fall onto the floor. Trent. Are you okay? Gwen yells, after seeing Trent fall from being wrapped in a rope lasso. Why yeah. I'm good. Just surprised is all. Trent says, he tries to move only to find that his movements were retrained by the rope and he could only roll himself onto the floor and move his hands. What's going on? Gwen asks. I don't know. Trent says. He starts looking around for something to use in getting free from this lasso he was trapped in and he sees a rock with a sharp edge near him. But I'll get us out of here. He yells before starts rolling toward the sharp rock. He reaches the rock, with his back facing it and he tries to grab the rock, only to miss grabbing it as he couldn't see where it was. But Gwen could, so, she started directing Trent to where the rock was located. No Trent, go lower, now go to your left. No, not the right, the left. Gwen directs Trent to the rock and after a few failed attempts to get the rock, Trent finally gets a hold of it. There, you got it. Once Trent feels he has the rock in his hand, he flips it and starts to cut the rope around his arms with the shape edge, and after a few moments, he cuts himself free from the rope. He sits up and starts cutting the rope from his legs and it doesn't take him long to be free from the rope. Hold on Gwen, I'm coming. Trent yells before he starts to head over to Gwen but as he runs to her, he steps onto something which sets off another trap that shoots out of the woods and heads straight toward him. Trent however sees the projectile coming and he ducks under it, letting soar over his head. Whoa, that was close. He says, letting out a sigh of relief. However, he wasn't aware that the projectile he had just dodged had hit a tree and the force of the impact actually knocked down a certain object that was attached to said tree, and that certain object was a beehive. Suddenly bees fly out of the fallen hive and gather in a single formation and see their home on the ground, this angers them as they look for the one responsible for this crime and they instantly spot Trent. Their eyes go red and they all fly over to the guitarist who was about to go over to Gwen to get her out of her net trap when he hears the angry buzzing coming from behind. He turns around and sees a swarm of angry bees all glaring at him. Trent was confused by this before he looked down and saw the fallen hive on the ground and realized what was going on. "Oh!" Trent utters, knowing he was in big trouble, and he looks at the bees with a sheepish smile. "Can I mention that I wasn't the one who made your hive fall?" he asks, hoping that the bees would at least listen, but the bees just take a formation of a large single bees, made up of all the hive, and they point their stingers at him. And it was at this moment Trent knew, he was guess not. Those were the final words Trent spoke before the swarm of bees attacked him, causing him to scream out from the pain of the stingers being stabbed into his skin before he took off running into the forest with the swarm in tow, leaving Gwen in her trap as she was in shock at what occurred. "What the hell? He ditched me again!" Gwen yells out, from both anger and shock at the fact that Trent had left her for the second time in a row, despite him promising he'd never leave her like that moment ago. Suddenly, rustling sounds were heard coming from the trees. "What the hell?" A voice speaks, making Gwen turn to where the voice was coming from. Just then, someone drops from a tree and lands on the ground and Gwen sees who it was. "The dude left you," this person says. "Naruto?" Gwen asks, spotting that familiar blonde/red hair on the person, and it was Naruto who looks at her with a teasing grin. "Who else do you know has blonde/red hair, can shred a guitar, and is this good looking?" Naruto asks, and Gwen couldn't help but snort and roll her eyes. "Haha, very funny," Gwen says. She looks at the net she was trapped in before she looks at Naruto. "Can you get me out of here?" she asks. "Sure," Naruto says as he walks over to the tree the net was hanging from and grabs the rope that held the net to the tree. He lowers Gwen to the ground before he cuts the rope connecting to the net, and the net falls with Duncan's knife and frees Gwen from the trap as she climbs out of the trap. "Thank you, Naruto," she says, and Naruto smiles. "No problem, Gwen, glad to help," Naruto says. Gwen looks around and sees the catapult that fired the projectile Trent dodged moments ago. "Did you make this, and these other traps?" Gwen asks, and Naruto nods. "Sure did," Naruto says. "How did you make all these traps in a short amount of time?" Gwen asks, wanting to know how one guy managed to make all this in 4 hours. Naruto just looks around at all the traps around the area for a bit before he looks at Gwen. "That's something, I'll tell you another time," Naruto just says with a sheepish grin while he rubs the back of his back. "Okay," Gwen says with a raised eyebrow. Confessional, Naruto. Pranks can teach a person so much about planning and laying out traps for unsuspecting victims. Naruto says, sitting in the confessional outhouse as he grins at the camera. "I only learned from the best," he says while kicking up his feet and lying back on the wall of the outhouse. End confessional. Before any one of the two could say anything, Naruto saw what Gwen was and knew what he had to do. "Also, before I forget," Naruto says as he looks at Gwen while discreetly aiming something he had. "Sorry about this," he says with an apologetic expression, and Gwen was confused by this. "What are you saying sorry for?" Gwen says, but before she could continue to ask him what he was sorry about, she hears something go off and she then feels something strike her belly, causing her to feel intense pain. She looks down and sees a blob of blue paint on her clothes and her eyes widen. She looks at Naruto and sees his paintball gun was aimed at her as she looks at him, and sees he has a big grin on his face. "You're my little dear," Naruto says in a poor imitation of Elmer Fudd. It was at this point Gwen realized she had been played. "You sly little," Gwen was saying before she was cut off by an air horn siren coming from the PA system. "Attention human wildlife and hunters. Hunt time is up." Suddenly Chris's voice was heard through the woods, making everyone present, both human and deer, look up. Please report back to camp. It's time to show your hides and tally up the scores. Guess that's time. Naruto says as he lowers his paintball gun and straps it to his back before he looks at Gwen. Wanna walk back to camp together? He asks and Gwen takes a moment to think about it and finds the idea to be not bad. Sure, why not? Gwen says, shrugging her shoulders as the two start making their way back to the campgrounds, where they'll see the others and see who won the challenge. Time skip, 20 minutes later. Location, Main Square, Campgrounds, Camp Wawanika. Tisk, TSK. Chris lets out as he paces back and forth. Currently, all of the base and gophers, except for Duncan, Courtney, and Katie for the base and Heather, Beth, Lindsay, Cody, and Trent for the gophers, were lined up back at camp. Trent, having been the victim of a bee attack, was currently in the infirmary tent, getting treated for the mass amount of bee stings he obtained from the attack. Owen was currently covered in mud and bruises and a black eye, thanks to Eva's beating. Lashana was in the same state she was in earlier. The reason you may be wondering why Heather, Beth, and Lindsay were not with the others is simple to explain. During the argument between Heather and Beth, Beth had enough and actually shot Heather in the thigh, hurting the queen bee. This prompted Heather to take Lindsay's paintball gun and start shooting Beth with the braces-wearing girl firing back. This also alerted the group of Harold, Bridget, and Jeff to their location and witnessed the strange fight, but this allowed them to fire at the two, covering them in their paint and gaining a score on the board. The two girls who augured with each other were at the communal bathrooms, washing away the paint from their bodies while Lindsay was being scolded and punished by Chef for her break-in. As for Cody, Katie, Duncan, and Courtney's whereabouts? Yeah, I'll let the episode take over. Stealing from Chef, eating chips and blueberries in the woods, getting attacked by bees, pissing off a fake deer with fart while also pissing off actual deer, and setting up traps around the forest. Do you know what I see here? I see a very undisciplined group. I see a disgraceful mess. I see a massive waste of paint product. Chris lists off all the events of the challenge as he looks at all the current campers in front of him. And I have to say, that was awesome. He yells before he starts laughing, perking up a few of the campers. Epic chase scenes, surprise traps and hunting skills, animal connections, disrespectful shots, and just so much happening all at once. Wicked TV guys. The host says to the campers with a thumbs up, happy they brought out all the drama into a challenge he originally thought would be boring, and this causes some of the campers to let out the breath they were unconsciously holding in. Hey! Harold speaks up as he notices the lack of two base. Where are Duncan and Courtney? And Cody and Katie? They didn't come back. Dawn says, noticing that those two were also not with them. Just then grunting could be heard coming from the bushes, and it gains everyone's attention as they watch Duncan and Courtney come into the scene, while walking in unison due to their antler hats being tangled up. Oh, this is too much. Gwen says, smirking at the scene. Duncan. Owen says in between laughs. You sly dog, you. You work fast, man. Didn't think you had that dog in you. Naruto says with a smirk as Duncan looks at them with a smirk of his own. The girl can't keep her antlers off me. Duncan jokes around at the situation and Courtney doesn't find it funny one bit as she kicks him in the kiwis. Can't even bend over. The punk utters through the pain as he tries not to cry from it. Easy, Courtney. Our medical tent is really only equipped for one at a time and Trent's messed up. Chris said while gesturing to Trent, who was getting the stingers pried off from his body. Okay, the only ones unaccounted for are Cody and Katie, since we know where Heather, Beth, and Lindsay are. The host says, wondering where the two could be. We're, right, here. Everyone turns at the sound of a familiar voice as they see Cody and Katie gradually emerge from the forest, but both were covered in mud, scratches, claw marks, and Cody had a black eye for some reason while their clothes were torn in some areas, with Cody carrying Katie with his arm around her. Whoa, what the hell happened to y'all? Lashana asks the two as they walk to the others while panting heavily as Katie looks at her. Raccoons, we were attacked by a family of raccoons. Katie says, which causes everyone to at her with confusion on their faces while Chris snaps his fingers. Ah, right. I did watch you two running from a family of hungry raccoons. I forgot we even had raccoons on the island. You two were attacked by raccoons and ran until you jumped into a river and swam to the other side for safety. Chris says, remembering the footage of the chase, and started laughing at how their expressions were the moment the raccoon mafia jumped them. It was hilarious. The host says as he wipes a tear away, but Cody and Katie were not amused by the host's humor. Can we please go into the infirmary to get checked out and also get treated? Cody asks since there was a chance that they could have rabies. Chris nods. Oh yeah, you guys can go. Chris says, and the two make their way. The host turns to the other campers. Well, seeing as 3 members of the Gophers were dripping in paint, and 2 weren't even deer, while 1 hunter from the Gophers got beat up by a base deer, I think we have our winners. The host yells and the base cheers in celebration while the Gophers just gain defeated expressions, having suffered a second straight loss. They'll be off to a hunting camp shindig later in the week. He says, and he hears a gasp, and knew fully well who was responsible for the gasp. And relax, this is optional, so you can choose if you want to go. He says, and he hears a sigh of relief as he sees Dawn holding her hand to her chest while Naruto has his hand on her shoulder, in support of her. Chris then turns to the defeated Gophers, about to let them know what was going to come. Gophers, I'll be seeing you at the campfire ceremony, again. The host says before he walks off, going to get things ready for tonight. The others process to leave, with the base going to celebrate their victory while the Gophers there just head toward their cabin and get their things ready for tonight. In the infirmary tent, Trent had been sedated by the medics to let his body rest and heal from the bee stings while Cody and Katie had been treated for their wounds and had taken some shots just in case they gained rabies from the raccoons. The two sat in the same bed, side by side to one another in silence as they didn't know what to say. So, Cody speaks, breaking this awkward silence. So, that was something. Katie says, and Cody couldn't help but agree by nodding. Yeah, it was. Cody says, and the two fall back to the silence they were previously in. Katie sighs and turns to Cody as the nerd of the Gophers turns to her upon noticing her looking at him. Thank you, Cody, for helping me go through the forest while running from the raccoons, and for carrying me after I fell and scraped my knee. Katie says, and Cody just waves her off. Hey, it was no biggie. I should be thanking you since it was your idea to throw the chips and berries at the raccoons before saying we had to jump into the water. Cody says, just shrugging as he was the one who should be thankful to Katie for even coming up with the idea of them jumping into the water to escape the raccoons. Katie smiles at this and waves Cody off at his praise of her. Yeah, and sorry for accidentally elbowing you in the eye while we were underwater in the river. Katie says as she rubs her arm while Cody just rubs his swollen dark eye and whines at the pain. It was nothing, like you said, it was an accident and I won't hold it against you. Cody says, cracking a gasp-toothed smile as Katie smiles, relieved he wasn't going to hold it against her. Thank you. Katie says, she then looks at the time at the tent's wall and sees it was nearly time for sunset and knows Cody has to get ready. She gets up and was about to go but stops before turning around and gives Cody a surprising hug. This is for good luck, for the campfire ceremony later. I hope you stay, Cody. The girl says before she breaks the hug and looks at Cody for one final time. See you later. She says before leaving the tent, leaving behind a surprised Cody. Yeah, I'll see you later and, thanks. Cody says after a while but a smile appears on his face. He then sighs and leans back onto the bed as he looks at the tent's ceiling. Sigh, what a day. He says, just staring at the ceiling, unaware someone had entered the tent and was looking at him. Hello, Cody. Cody hears someone call out to him as he sits up and sees the person who entered the tent looking at him with a smirk. "I'd like to have a word with you." Time skip, that night. Location, the Campfire Pits, Camp Wawanika. The campfire ceremony. 2 times in a row. What is wrong with you people? Heather yells at her teammates, minus Trent who was still in the infirmary. After she got cleaned, she finds out that they lost the challenge and that completely annoys her since this was something she really didn't like. They should be winning the challenges, not losing them. I just wish I could vote for more campers at once. The mean queen yells as she glares at the others, wishing she could vote them all off. Before anything else could be said or done, Chris walked up with his plate of marshmallows. There are only 7 marshmallows on this plate. Chris tells everyone as he holds up the plate full of marks of safety. When I call your name, come up and claim your marshmallow. The camper dash. Who does not receive a marshmallow must immediately return to the dock of shame, catch the boat of losers, and leave. Gwen cuts Chris and quickly says the rest of the host's speech that he tells in every single ceremony. Can't we just get this over with? The goth asks with crossed arms as Chris just looks at her with a frown. Fine. Whatever. Spoil the moment. Chris says, mad at Gwen for her interruption but ultimately decides to go along with the goth's request. Lindsay. Owen. Gwen. Cody. Chris quickly lists off the 5 gophers who would be staying and throws them marshmallows as he tosses 5 marshmallows to the 5. Trent's not here but he's safe too. The host says as he hangs onto 1 marshmallow, that signifies Trent's safety. Beth was shaking in her stump and crossing her fingers as Heather glared at her while running a finger through her neck. Beth. Heather was immediately caught off guard by this as Chris tosses a marshmallow at the braces-wearing girl who catches it in relief. Heather actually finds herself worried. There was 1 marshmallow and only 2 campers without marshmallows. Herself, and Lashana. Campers, this is the final marshmallow tonight. Chris tells everyone while he tosses the final marshmallow up and down in the air as Heather tries to keep her cool while Lashana just smirks, knowing that she was safe. Chris looks at the 2 remaining campers on the chopping block as a dramatic pause takes over the air before he points at the camper who was safe. Heather. Chris says and this takes off the guard of Lashana and most of the others. What? Lashana shouts in shock as she shoots up from her stump while Heather, upon her name, quickly snatches the final marshmallow from Chris. But, how? The girl with a "toot" yells, confused by how she was voted off. That's what the campers have spoken. You're out. Chris says but Lashana's jaw was down, due to the shock. But. Lashana was trying to speak, trying to defend her case that the votes couldn't have been for her but the host raised a hand at her, silencing her. Lashana. The dock of shame awaits, girl. You will be missed. Chris says as he points toward the dock and Lashana knows, she couldn't argue with him, so she lowers her head and walks towards the dock of shame in defeat. Heather watches Lashana walk to the docks in defeat as she mockingly waves goodbye to the girl with a "toot" before she turns to the others and glares at them. You are all lucky, okay? Very lucky. Heather yells to everyone, quickly making a few of them regret their decision to get rid of Lashana. Confessional, Heather. It was easy to swing the votes to my favor. I bribed Owen with food while I got Beth and Lindsay to vote for her, but I knew it wouldn't be enough to get Lashana kicked off, so I talked to someone who had the winning vote. Heather says as she sits in the outhouse, filing her nails before she looks at the camera. And it didn't take long for me to sway him into doing it, since I could spin things and say he's working with the other team and make him into the bad guy. And not just him, I could also make the one he was with also the bad guy in her team. Plus, Lashana was getting too close to Gwen, and I couldn't let them get close enough to work together. So, I had to get one enemy out early before they got too strong. She says before she stops filing her nails and looks at the camera and lets out a smirk. This should show the others that, I'm in control of this game and no one is going to stop me going to the final two. She says. End confessional. As Lashana was walking towards the dock of shame in shock, Dawn could be seen meditating on the roof of the killer base cabin. As Lashana walked, one of the boards on the dock suddenly snapped under her feet and she fell into the cold water, resulting in a splash, as Dawn's eyes snapped open, from sensing a dark aura on the island. The other team's darkness has grown. Dawn utters, feeling the dark aura was growing with each waking moment. And with that grim remark comes the end of yet another episode of Total Drama Island. 3 days have passed and another morning raises on Camp Wawanaka. Our focus starts on the base's cabin, specifically the boys' side of the cabin where we see the boys all sleeping, each pleasantly in their bunks. Duncan was the first to wake up as he stretched a bit and leaped off his bunk before throwing himself onto the floor to perform his morning routine in the form of push-ups with his eyes closed. He takes deep breaths with each set of push-ups before he starts to smell something strange and awful near him. Duncan opens his eyes and looks around to see what was the cause of the horrendous smell, and to his shock and disgust, he sees a pair of blue underwear in front of him lying on the ground in front of him just by his and Harold's bunk. At the same time, that was disgusting on its own. What was now disgusting was the fact that there was a brown stain on the undies. Duncan gags and backs away from the marked undies as the commotion wakes Jeff, DJ, and Harold while Naruto remains blissfully asleep. The trio looks at Duncan and sees the undies before they quickly realize what happened, and Jeff and DJ start laughing while Duncan just glares at Harold. Not cool, Harold man, not cool. Duncan yells his frustration at the ginger, who blankly looks at him before turning to the underwear and turning back to the delinquent. Those aren't mine. Harold instantly denies and the others don't believe him. Oh right, you're always leaving your gitch lying around. Duncan says, glaring at the nerd who just looks at him. No, I'm not. Gosh. Harold yells, crossing his arms as he tries to defend himself while Jeff and DJ hop out of their bunks and go stand with Duncan. Like, yeah you are dude. Jeff says as he crosses his arms. Harold hops out of his bed and stands in front of the three. You have like, absolutely no proof. Harold says, crossing his arms as he waits for the proof the three had on him. No one else wears that kind here dude. Jeff says. And your mom sewed your name onto the label. DJ speaks up, pointing to the undies on the floor as Harold's name was indeed sewed onto the label. Plus, you're even wearing one right now. Duncan says, pointing to the ones Harold was wearing as he, for some reason, wasn't in his PJs like the others were and only in his shirt and had no pants on, showing his skinny long legs to the viewing world. Whatever. Harold mutters angrily as he grabs his towel from his bath. I'm going for a shower. He yells as he processes to leave the cabin. Hey, don't forget to clean the skid marker. Duncan shouts with a smirk as he and his roommates snicker. Just as Harold exits the cabin, Duncan looks at Jeff and DJ as an idea pops into his head. I think Harold needs to be taught a lesson, boys. You in? He asks as Jeff and DJ grin. A lesson. If you're thinking about pranks, I might be of some help. A voice speaks and the trio looks for the source and sees Naruto leaping off his bunk. Morning man. How was the sleep? DJ greets his teammate who nods at him. Pretty good. Naruto says as he lets out a yawn while he stretches a bit. So, how much did you hear? Jeff asks. All of it. If you're thinking about pranking him, count me in. Naruto says as he mischievous grin. This prompts the others to grin as well. Oh, Harold is so going to regret leaving his CRP on the floor. Duncan says as he had a feeling this was going to be fun. Yeah. The four base boys agree as they give each other high fives. Time skip, 2 hours later. Location, the beach near the mess hall. After having a decent breakfast, the two teams were together at the beach, ready to hear what would be today's challenge as Chris was standing in front of them. Today's challenge will test your minds, your teamwork, and your skills in the kitchen. Chris says as the campers look at him with raised eyebrows, what did he mean by in the kitchen? You'll be cooking a 3-course meal and serving it to me for tasting. The host says and the campers now understood what he meant by that. The winners get a reward. The losers will send someone home. Yeah, what else is new? Heather says as she rolls, bored about hearing the same conditions of each challenge. For some unknown reason, she had her hair in a low ponytail. Chris glares at her for her comment before he clears his throat. Each team will appoint a head chef to create the theme of the meal and to oversee the cooking. Chris says as some campers look at each other with nervous expressions, to cook, you need ingredients. Every morning, a truck brings us food. Today's challenge starts there. As soon as he says that, a truck rolls out of the water in reverse onto the beach and the window rolls down to reveal the driver of the truck, which was a dolphin in a suit. It peeks out of the window and gives the group a salute. Confessional, Gwen. What the F? Gwen utters, in shock as she tries to figure out what she just witnessed. Static. Confessional, Dawn. I've seen creatures of Mother Nature do all sorts of incredible things. Dawn explains to the audience. And not just on this island, but a dolphin driving a truck underwater, that's a new one. She says with a surprised look. Static. Confessional, Naruto. And just when you think you've seen everything, something new pops up, cool. Naruto says, leaning against the stall's wall as he accepts what he's seen and will just move on with life. End confessional. As the winners of the last challenge, the killer base were given the first look inside the truck. Jeff, DJ, Duncan, and Naruto were the ones to open the truck up. Jeff and Naruto hop inside of it and look at the mass amount of different ingredients. So, got any ideas? Duncan asks while the two are looking at the ingredients, trying to come up with a theme. That was when Naruto snaps his fingers. How about a multicultural theme? Naruto suggests as Duncan looks at the rocker with a grin. Hello, head chef. Duncan yells and Naruto looks at him with a surprised look. Me? Really? Naruto asks and Duncan and Jeff nod, agreeing to the idea of him being the head chef. Naruto wasn't too sure as he looked at the others. Is that okay with you guys? He asks the others as they all nod or shrug their shoulders, agreeing to the idea. Naruto smiles as he just accepts the job. Okay then, let's get to work. He says and the guys start gathering the ingredients they need. While the gophers were outside the truck, waiting for their turn. Head chef called it. Heather speaks up and quickly takes the leadership role as the others really couldn't complain since none of them felt like they wanted the job. Heather then turns to Beth and gives her a nasty look, try not to screw up this time, okay? She says in a low tone to Beth who gasps a bit before she nervously nods. Despite the fact she stood up to Heather in the last challenge, Beth couldn't help but still feel intimidated by Heather and it didn't help that ever since the last. Just ignore her. She's all talk no bark. Gwen says as Beth just gulps in response. Confessional, Heather. I had to take the leadership role. Hello, we're on a losing streak. Heather grunts, feeling tired by this losing train her team was seemingly on for the past 2 challenges. And really, everyone else on the team is pretty useless. End confessional. With the base having finished collecting the ingredients they need, they hop out of the truck and leave for the mess hall as the gophers are about to collect. Heather looks at the remaining boxes and starts having an idea of what theme and dishes they should make. Let's see, Cody, you get the mangoes, Beth, pineapples, Lindsay, macadamia, Trent, molasses, Gwen, tomatoes, and Owen, you grab the oranges. We'll come back for the rest after we've put the first ingredients in the kitchen. Okay, let's move it, people. Heather yells as her teammates just roll their eyes and start grabbing the ingredients she listed. Some of them were wishing someone else was the head chef instead of her. While the base were walking away, Dawn couldn't help but look back at the gophers and stare right at them. The aura reader winches at what she is sensing, from whatever she was sensing was that bad. Her winch was heard by Naruto, who was walking next to her, as he looked down at her and saw her staring at the gophers. "What's up, Dawn? Why are you looking at the other team like that?" Naruto asks as Dawn continues to stare at the gophers. "I'm starting to get worried about the other team." Dawn whispers, and this prompts Naruto to raise one of his eyebrows. "Why?" Naruto asks, and Dawn turns to him. "It's just, remember that strange feeling I was feeling from the gophers when we returned from Boney Island?" Dawn asks as Naruto thinks back to that day and indeed remembers her saying something like that when they got back. "Yeah. What about it?" Naruto asks. "That feeling is still there, only this time, it's much larger than before, like a dark cloud is consuming them by the day, and it's getting worse to the point that it's bringing more chaos upon them, more so than usual." Dawn says. This causes Naruto to frown as he thinks about something and realizes something. Well, now that you do say that, they have been having a string of bad luck lately, like how Trent was in a bee attack in the last challenge, or how DJ told me how Owen's gun jammed just when he had him trapped on top of the 1,000-foot cliff, or how Eva beat him up right after he outed himself when she didn't hear him from what I've heard. Something's not right here, this can't be a coincidence. Naruto says, squinting his eyes in thought as the events couldn't be on mere coincidence. He opens his eyes and looks at Dawn. "Wait, do you think whatever is going on with the gophers will come to us next?" He asks, worried that whatever was wrong with the other team could jump to them next, but much to his relief, Dawn shakes her head. "No, not from what I'm seeing." Dawn says as she looks back to the gophers, seeing them taking out their boxes one by one. It seems like whatever is affecting the other team is anchored to them. If there is a source, we have to find it and get rid of it, if only I could sense where it is. She says, frowning. "Don't worry, sooner rather than later, you're going to find whatever is going on with the other team. It's your talent, and it's pretty cool." Naruto complains the aura reader as Dawn's cheeks start to gain a pink color as she smiles and turns away from the rocker. Thank you for that. It's really sweet of you." Dawn shyly says, and Naruto just smiles and shrugs his shoulders. I'm just being honest." Naruto says. Soon enough, both teams arrived at the mess hall kitchen and they saw it was large enough for both teams to use at the same time, with one side belonging to the base to work in and the other side for the gophers. The gophers just drop their ingredients and go back to the truck to collect some of their ingredients. "Okay guys, we have 3 courses to make and we have 10 people here. So, we should have 3 teams of 9 to focus on the courses. Who's with who and what dish idea do you have in mind?" Naruto asks. "That's a good idea actually," Courtney says as she puts her hand on her chin. "I'm thinking since we're doing a multicultural theme, we start things off light but savory, then go with something heavy and filling and top it off with sweet and exotic. I can make one of my abuela's dishes from back home. A bowl of gazpacho," she offers, and Naruto nods. "That's cool of you, Courtney," Naruto says as Courtney smiles. That was until Duncan shrugged his shoulders. Guess I can out with that. Shouldn't be too strong," Duncan says, and Courtney loses her smile and holds back her disgust, now knowing she had to work with the delinquent. "So, anyone got ideas for dessert?" he asks, looking around for anyone who might have an idea of the dessert. The others stay quiet as they look at each other, assuming someone has an idea. I can make something." A voice speaks lowly and everyone turns to the source and sees Eva, who has her hand shyly raised in the air. "It's something my mom makes whenever something big happens back home. Medovic, it's really good. Trust me," she admits. Everyone was looking at her in surprise and Eva started to feel embarrassed, thinking that they were going to make fun of her. "Oh, nice, seems like we got the mussels for our dessert." Duncan says with a smirk as he goes to Eva and goes for a high five. Eva was surprised by this since she thought that she would be made fun of, but seeing as everyone was cool with this, she smirked and high-fives Duncan. Great, now that we have the appetizer and dessert, all that's left is the main and I have an idea of what to make. Naruto says, grinning as he already knew what to make. Which is, dude? Jeff asks and Naruto looks at him. A bowl of my family's greatest dish, a bowl of Uzumaki style, miso chashu pork ramen. It's really good if done correctly. But it takes a while to make and a lot to prepare it. So, that means, we have to start now if we want to make it by the deadline. So, I'm going to need some help with this. I can help with that, man. DJ says as he places his hand on Naruto's shoulder. Me too, and I know how to make pasta. Bridget says with her hand raised. DJ and her look at each other and smile as they high-five one another while Naruto smiles and nods at them. Awesome. So, Duncan and Courtney are on the appetizer, Bridget, DJ and I are on the main course and Eva's on the dessert. The others can join the dish they think they can help the best. Naruto says as he looks at the remaining 5. I'll help Eva with the dessert. Dawn quickly offers her services to Eva with her hand raised. Since I can't bring myself to cook any meal involving meat. She says while shivering, in seeing the meat products there. That's alright Dawn, we understand completely. Naruto says, knowing about her vegetarian ways and the others had no problem with her. I can help with the appetizer. Katie says with a smile. Guess that means you guys have me and Harold on the main course. Jeff says as he and Harold walk up to the trio. Yeah, we'll rock this dish. I'm like a black belt when it comes to cutting cheese. Harold says as he performs some slight karate chops. However, his comment causes the others to laugh and Harold gets confused, not realizing what they were laughing at. There is no cheese in miso chashu pork ramen, dude. Naruto says with a blank expression while a sweat drop runs down the side of his head while Duncan just wipes his eyes. Yeah, besides try not to cut the cheese in our direction and we'll be fine. Duncan says while snickering as Harold finally realizes why the others are laughing as he blushes in embarrassment. Eventually, Naruto gains their attention again. Alright guys, now that we know our roles, let's get to work. We have a lot to cook to do. Naruto says and the others agree as they start unpacking their ingredients to get things started. Before Duncan could go, he felt a hand grabbing his shoulder and he turned to see Courtney looking at him. Just make sure you don't mess this up. Courtney says while giving Duncan a stern look while the delinquent just takes her hand off his shoulder as he just puts his fingers onto her chin and lifts her head towards his. Relax princess, I got this. Besides, you should worry about not cutting yourself while staring at me. Duncan says with a sly tone as he lets go of Courtney and walks away, leaving the CIT to glare at his back with a flustered expression. Confessional, Courtney. Ugh. Courtney groans before crossing her arms as she looks at the camera. Duncan's totally unmotivated. And he never washes his hand. He's so obnoxious and she starts to list off the reasons why she doesn't like working with Duncan, much less being near him, but the footage speeds up as she had been speaking for a bit before it stops. Owning sunglasses doesn't automatically make you cool the footage speeds up once more and stops at a point. People like that are so annoying. I mean, honestly, who does that? And don't even get me started on his hair. It would appear that she was still ranting about her reasons for not liking Duncan. Static. Confessional, chef. Poor fool is in love with the punk. Chef says as he is sitting in the confessional, and shaking his head. She talks too much and it went off track for a while. If someone like that does that, that only means they're in love and Chef, why are you in the confession stall? Chris's voice could be heard outside the stall. Just because I feel like it. End confessional. A little while and the base were at work preparing their dishes. Naruto was busy with the broth of the ramen while Bridget was busy with making the ramen noodles while DJ was busy with the chashu sauce. He had a list of instructions made by Naruto on how to make it, and Jeff was busy with the pork belly, and Harold was busy with the boiling the eggs. He looks over at Duncan as the delinquent is busy chopping some tomatoes as Duncan looks up and notices Naruto looking at him and the two give a quick nod. They turn to Jeff and DJ who notice them and give them a nod, as they return one. It was time for phase number 1 of the lesson. If Harold was going to leave his dirty drawers all over the cabin and refuse to admit they were his and pick them up, then they were going to make him regret it, badly. Jeff quickly excuses himself from the kitchen and rushes to the cabin to do something. Phase 1 of the lesson was for Jeff to head over to the cabin and collect all of Harold's pants, his swimming trunks, and undies, clean or dirty, and take them all away, except for one item which Jeff was off doing. It took a bit but Jeff returns and peeks his head over the SWNGNG doors that led into the kitchen. He looks at DJ who notices him and gives the giant 2 thumbs ups. That was the signal for the second step of phase 1. DJ nods and starts to fill a pot with water before he takes it and starts walking around, specifically towards Harold. Where do you want this water, Bridget? DJ asks, holding the pot in front of him as he doesn't notice Harold and bumps into the nerd, purposefully slashing the water all over Harold's pants. Oops. The giant quickly, while holding back his grin. Hey! Harold snarls as he looks down and sees his wet pants before he glares at DJ. Smooth move, Dorcahontas. He says. The others look to see what had happened while the guys were having fun. Oh, that really sucks bro. Naruto says while fighting his laugh back. You better go change or everyone will think you wet yourself, again. He says, he was having a strong time fighting his laugh back. Harold groans as he walks out of the kitchen, never noticing Naruto and DJ giving each other low fives while giving Jeff a thumbs up. Is there a reason why you're pulling a prank on Harold? The two flinch after hearing a voice behind them and they turn to see Dawn standing there. Oh, what's up Dawn? Naruto asks and Dawn just crosses her arms. Do you have a reason why you and the others are pulling a prank on Harold? Dawn asks, looking at Naruto who just puts his hands at the back of his head. DJ chose this as the moment to leave the two. Well, let's just say that he deserves what's coming to him. Trust me, this is well-deserved justice for us after what he's been doing. Naruto says with a grin. Dawn looks at him for a bit with a narrow look, trying to see if he was lying by his aura and she sees that he wasn't. Okay, I'll take your word for it, for now. Just be sure that it doesn't mentally scar him like that corncob prank. Dawn says and Naruto nods. You got it. Naruto says and the two go back to their stations to resume their dishes. Screaming Gopher's kitchen. Meanwhile, on the Gopher's side of the kitchen, we see the team carrying in their ingredients except for Heather who was giving orders while wearing a white apron and holding a clipboard. Gwen, Lindsay, you're on the citrus macadamia upside down cake flambe. Heather tells the goth and blonde bombshell what they'd be making as the two are putting some stuff down on the table. Know how to make an upside down flamer thingy? Lindsay whispers to Gwen who just shakes her head. No clue. Gwen says, already feeling tired from the challenge. Cody, you, Owen, and Trent on rib duty. Heather says as the two dudes of the team just look at each other before looking at a stack of ribs on the table in front of them. Heather then turns to Beth. Beth, you and Owen are on pineapple skewers and mango dip. And make sure you don't mess this up this time. She says as someone notices something wrong with what she just said. Wait, didn't you just dash, Trent was saying, realizing Heather gave Owen 2 jobs he wasn't aware of as he wasn't in the kitchen with them. But before he could finish with what he was saying, Cody cuts him off. You know, I know a killer pineapple and mango salsa recipe we could try. Cody says as he wasn't that confident in his skills behind the meat. Oh really? Well, that sounds great and all, but I'm the head chef and we're going to stick to my plan, and my plan is that you're on ribs while Beth and Owen are on pineapples with sticks through them. Got it? Heather asks. It was at that exact moment Owen enters the kitchen, holding a crate of oranges. However, he can't see where he was going. He accidentally bumps into Heather and this causes him to lose balance, and he ends up dropping the crate of oranges onto the floor and trips over all of them, and hits the floor back first, smashing all the oranges in the process. This causes the rest of the gophers to turn and see what happened as Heather glares down at the downed oaf. Great, now we need to get more oranges. Go back to the truck and get another crate of oranges. Yes ma'am. Owen mumbles as he picks himself up from the floor and walks out of the kitchen, heading back to the truck to get more oranges. Heather sighs before she turns to everyone. Alright everyone, let's get moving, we're burning daylight. Heather says as the others couldn't help but listen as they start preparing the dishes. Location, Killer Base Cabin. Harold. Shirt. Harold was in the cabin, at his dresser looking for some dry pants to wear, but he frowned a bit as all he could find in the dresser were shirts, no underwear or pants anywhere. Even his swimming trunks were missing. He digs further into the dresser in search of something to wear until he finds something he had brought for a potential, special occasion. He stares at it with a smile. Looks like it's your time to shine. Harold says. As he pulls out the item from the dresser and processes to wear it as the camera, fortunately, zooms out of the cabin, sparing the audience what was happening inside. Meanwhile, with Owen. Owen could be seen running back to the mess hall, carrying a new crate of oranges. In his haste back to the mess hall, he suddenly trips and collides with a tree and once again falls to the ground. He groans from the pain while he hears a buzzing sound above him. Owen opens his eyes and to his horror, he sees he was right below a hornet's nest. The collision seems to aggravate the hornets as they come out of the hive and spot him, and quickly mark him as a threat to their hive. The hornets swarm and attack Owen, who jumps back to his feet and runs away while trying to swat the bees away. Back in the mess hall, Killer Base Kitchen. Back in the kitchen, on the Killer Base side, Bridget was with DJ as they were busy kneading their pasta. She was eyeing Jeff as the party dude was busy talking to Naruto while they were looking at the pork belly roasting, the broth boiling and the now boiled eggs soaking in a bowl of soy sauce. Jeff seems to notice her staring as he smiles and winks at her. This causes Bridget to blush and look away, and DJ sees what happened and can't help but grin. I think he's into you. DJ whispers to Bridget, whose blush reddens and starts to look shy. What? No, maybe. I don't know. I mean, he's kinda cute. Bridget says. But before anything else could be said or done, DJ suddenly speeds to Jeff and Naruto as he gestures to the party boy to do his magic on Bridget. Before Jeff could say anything about what was happening, DJ shoves him toward where Bridget was, and the two were now standing next to each other. Naruto was confused by what was going on as DJ just gestured to him to watch what was about to happen. Bridget notices Jeff standing next to her and she smiles. What's up? Bridget asks as Jeff starts to get nervous. And not much, just wanted to see how you were doing. Jeff says. Bridget seems to be fine with this as she nods and goes back to kneading her noodles. Jeff turns back to DJ, who gives him a thumbs up and he smiles before nodding back at him, and he turns back to Bridget. You know, you do look good when you're cooking dinner. He says, and Bridget looks at him with a smile. Really? Bridget asks with a small blush as Jeff smiles. Naruto and DJ start to smile at this, seeing their friend was starting to make moves toward the surfer. Yeah, kinda like my friend Evan's really hot mom. Jeff says. Naruto and DJ quickly lose their smiles after hearing this, while Bridget loses both her blush and happy mood as any feeling she was having for Jeff completely took a 180. Excuse me? Bridget yells at Jeff. Seeing that things were about to get heated, Naruto and DJ quickly got in between the two. Hey Jeff, we still need to watch over the pork belly and broth. Naruto says while grabbing Jeff by his shoulders. DJ quickly nods. Yeah, let us get back on kneading these noodles. DJ says as Jeff, who was still smiling and wasn't realizing his mistake, and how Bridget was angrily glaring at him. Sure thing buds. Jeff says, and just as he was about to leave, he sends another wink at Bridget. Later Bridge. He says as he and Naruto leave. However, all Bridget did was shake her head in response and go back to kneading her noodles. DJ winches slightly, after seeing the massive fail. Confessional, DJ. And you're back to 0 on the relationship scale, Jeff. DJ says while shaking his head. End confessional. Back in the Gopher's kitchen. Trent and Cody were busy brushing their ribs and so far, things were going well. Trent was busy looking at Gwen as she was busy mixing a bowl. Just then, the door bursts open and everyone turns to it to see Owen standing in front of it, holding the crate of oranges, but to their shock, he was covered in red swollen spots all over his body. It's okay everyone, I'm back. Owen pants as he looks at Trent. Hey Trent, heads up. He yells before he throws the crate at Trent. The musician was taken by surprise by this and couldn't react in time as the crate hit him square on the head and he collapsed to the floor. Oops. The big guy utters as he walks up to Trent's body and sees the musician's body twitch while laid out. Confessional, Heather. Everything is going great. Except for Owen's hornet stings and Trent's concussion, which means he's out of today's challenge. Heather says. She learned that both of them were being treated in the medic tent and Owen would be back later in the day but Trent was out. But still, today's challenge is still totally ours. She says with a sweet smile before face-palming at how things were going for her team. Back over to the base kitchen. Careful, don't cut too many big pieces of veggies with your big paws. Currently at the appetizer station, Duncan and Katie were busy chopping the tomatoes, cucumbers, red onion, green bell pepper, and garlic for Courtney so she could the chopped ingredients into a pot. She could blend them soon, but she was currently busy watching the two chop and she was busy watching Duncan like a hawk. All the pieces must be in equal sizes or else it'll throw the taste off. She says and Duncan just rolls his eyes. Careful, you're uptight but doesn't throw the taste off. Duncan fires back with a smirk as Courtney just gasps at this. Katie just looks at the two bicker with a raised eyebrow. She felt like she was watching an old married couple bicker. Oh, ha ha ha. Very fun dash. Courtney was laughing with sarcasm before the SWNGNG doors opened and everyone looked at the person who had entered. AH. She and the other girls scream in disgust at what they are seeing. It was Harold and he was wearing what could be the smallest red Speedo anyone in the kitchen had ever seen and that's it. Okay. Who took all my shorts? Harold asks, standing in front of everyone as he seemingly didn't care about what he was wearing or not being embarrassed. The guys on his team were laughing their asses off while the girls were looking at him, visibly disgusted and uncomfortable. Chris appears from behind the SWNGNG doors to see what's going on and he sees Harold and his current state and he winches in disgust. 3 more hours and counting, guys. Chris says before he walks away from the door, perhaps away from Harold. The others get back to their dishes as Harold walks over back to his station and starts working again, much to the discomfort and disgust of the others due to the lack of a certain piece of clothing. Back at the Gopher's side. These slices are totally uneven. We see Heather scolding Beth while she was looking over a piece with pineapple slices. Due to Owen's current injury, Beth was forced to do all the slicing and preparations alone but managed to get the pineapple slices done, but that seems it wasn't enough to please the head chef of the Gophers. Heather looked down at Beth who was sweating, both from nerves and exhaustion as she picked up the bowl of pineapple slices and dumped the slices into the trash can next to the table before placing the bowl back. But, that took me a long time just to slice all those. Heather says while Beth looks on in shock after seeing all her strong work getting dumped like that. I don't care, start over again. Beth yells, but Heather just narrows her eyes at the glasses-wearing girl who flinches at her. I don't care, do it again, and this time, cut them evenly. Heather says as she turns and walks away from Beth, who seems like she was about to cry while she looks flustered. Someone on their side had seen and heard their little commotion and had had enough. Okay, that's it. I've had enough of you and your CRP. The two turn and see Gwen drop bowl down and storm toward Heather before facing the mean queen, glaring at her with a nasty look. You don't get to say her slices were uneven when you haven't done SHT today. The goth says as Heather raises an eyebrow. Hello. I have been doing stuff here. Why else would I be the head chef? Heather asks and Gwen scoffs at the question. Oh, shut it, you weren't selected as head chef because you freaking called it. And who do you think you are fooling wearing that apron on? Are you on some power high or something? All you've done all day is boss everyone around, and give other two jobs at once when they can't, since one, they weren't made aware that they had two jobs, but you just expect them to do it anyway, and you complain and yell at us whenever we make a mistake or do something that we didn't do in the way you want it to be. Gwen yells as she is fed up with Heather's bossy attitude. This argument causes not only the Gophers to stop and watch but also the base, who were surprised to see their opponents argue now at a critical time of the challenge, but after hearing what Heather's been doing, most couldn't blame Gwen for her blow-up, while one only silently sighs and shakes their head. Heather doesn't seem bothered by Gwen's words as she just rolls her eyes before looking at Gwen. Oh, shut up, goth girl, no one cares what you have to say. Now, get back to the upside-down cake and leave Beth to slice the pineapples. Heather says before walking out of the kitchen to go and see if Owen is fine to work. Gwen stood in her position as she gritted her teeth and clenched her fists to the point where the knuckles were white. I swear, one of these days, you're going to get what's coming. Gwen mutters under her voice, swearing that Heather is going to get what was coming. She turns and goes back to her station where Lindsay had finished baking one layer of the upside-down cake and had a bottle in her hand. Back over on the base side. After that whole issue with the Gophers, the base resumed their duties, but they couldn't really focus due to Harold's current state of clothing. Harold was busy chopping the green onions as everyone in the team had enough of this, and one went up to him. Dude, you gotta put on some pants. Jeff had to be the person to tell Harold he was screwing everyone up thanks to his small speedo. It's unsanitary to cook in something that small. The party boy explains, chuckling a bit as he says the word small. The other boys chuckle a bit too while a few of the girls giggle. Hearing this, Harold puts his utensils down and looks at Jeff. So give me back my pants. Harold snarls as he was fed up with being teased like this. Duncan walks up to the nerd side and puts his hand on his shoulder. Harold's right, guys. Duncan says in an all too soft tone. The punk looks at Harold and smiles at him. If you go to the cabin, you'll find a clean pair of underwear and shorts waiting. He says. He gets an eye roll from Harold, who walks out of the kitchen as the rest of the boys gather together and start laughing. This was all part of their prank plan. This was phase number 2 of the lesson. Location, Killer Base Cabin. Harold. Eager to get out of his speedo, Harold quickly runs into the cabin and smiles seeing a pair of shorts and briefs lying on his bed. He walks over to the bed and grabs his briefs. That's more like it. Harold says, holding up the underwear which has a large orange stain on, but he seemingly ignores this as he slides them on. What he wasn't aware that the orange stain wasn't caused by his skid marker, no. Back in the kitchen, the base boys were still laughing out loud as Duncan and Naruto had items in their hands. Duncan was jiggling a bottle of hot sauce in his hand, while Naruto wasn't holding a bottle of hot sauce. No, he was holding something much worse. He had on a glove as he was holding a freshly chopped pepper, but this pepper was no ordinary pepper. It was the famous Naga, but Jolokia, mostly known as the ghost pepper, *1. Harold finishes putting on his briefs and smiles, feeling much better in his normal attire as he was about to put on his shorts when he suddenly freezes. He notices something wrong, something very wrong. He starts feeling an intense burning sensation down in his nether region. It didn't take long for this burning sensation to become too much for him. My biscuits are burning. Harold screams as he quickly bolts out of the cabin and rushes toward the lake. He dives straight into the water and stays below the surface for a bit before he submerges to the burning while steam was coursing off the water around him. Ah, Harold lets out a relief of relief before realizing that the boys had set him up. Idiots! He yells, raising his fist out of the water in anger. This was until he feels the intense burning sensation again and dives back into the water. Back with the Gophers. Gwen and Lindsay were seen at their station, staring at their finished citrus macadamia upside-down cake flambé with confusion. Well, Lindsay was the one confused while Gwen just had a bored expression. Heather enters the kitchen once more, having returned from the medic tent to see how were Owen and Trent. She learned Owen was recovering nicely and should be back any minute now. She looks over at Lindsay and Gwen sees their cake was finished but they aren't doing anything else besides staring at it. She walks over to them to see what the issue. What's wrong? Heather asks as Lindsay and Gwen look at her. We used all the flambé stuff but it won't flambé. Lindsay says, holding the now empty bottle. This causes Heather to raise an eyebrow and look at the cake. Nothing happened when you lit it? Heather asks as she sees the cake did look wet but still normal. This makes Lindsay realize her mistake and taps her forehead. Oh right. Lindsay says, now understanding things clearly. Heather shakes her head as she wasn't surprised by Lindsay's confusion, considering how dumb the girl is. She decides there that she'd take over. Pay attention girls. This is how you flambé. Step 1, pour the flambé liquid which you did manage. Heather starts instructing as Lindsay listens while Gwen just crosses her arms. Step 2 of 2, light it. She continues while pulling out a lighter and lights a flame as she moves the lit lighter toward the cake. Gwen watches closely as she quickly realizes something. Lindsay poured all the flambé liquid onto the cake, and that was a bad thing to do since bringing a flame to a highly flammable item, but she wasn't going to warn the mean queen as she felt what was about to happen was justified, taking into account on how snotty Heather had been acting today. Oh, this will be fun to see. Gwen thought as she smirked as Heather lit the cake and the cake literally exploded in her face. Once the explosion had stopped, Gwen takes a good look at Heather and put her hand to her mouth to stop herself from laughing out loud after seeing the state Heather's face was in. Heather, after a second or two of shock, wipes her face from the soot as she looks down at the cake which was now a pile of ash. She gets angry and turns to Lindsay and Gwen to yell at them but before she could, she sees Lindsay gasp at her in shock while Gwen has her hand to her mouth and looks like she is going to burst out. Laughing any moment now. She wonders what was the cause of their reactions and assumes something was still on her face. She wipes her face and feels nothing on it but stops for a moment when she feels something off, like, something is missing. She takes a pan that was near her and looks at it to see her reflection and gasps in shock upon seeing the state of her face and what is wrong with it. She sees her eyebrows have completely burned off from the fiery explosion. Oh my God, my eyebrows. Heather shrieks, from the horror of seeing her eyebrows gone. Cody. She shouts, getting the only remaining boy on their team to run over to them. Hello ladies, what can I do for you today? Cody asks with a cheesy grin as he looks at them, especially Gwen, but he stops and notices Heather's face and her missing eyebrows. Get my makeup bag from the cabin. It's on the dresser in front of the mirror. And just that, don't go looking through our stuff or I swear, I will end you. Heather yells, glaring at Cody while Lindsay and Gwen look at him with a stern expression, agreeing with Heather. Cody gulps and takes a step back. Ah, okay. Cody says before he turns around and runs out of the kitchen and heads toward the cabin. Sure, he might not get along with Heather, something everyone on his team could say and be honest about it, but that didn't mean he didn't want to be yelled at by her. So, he'd do this one little errand and that's it. Simple as that. Back in the kitchen, Heather continues to look at her reflection, mourning for her burnt eyebrows as Beth walks up to them with a look and taps on Heather's shoulder, getting the attention and wrath of the mean queen. Can I go to the bathroom? I have to go. The farm girl asks, while her legs were slightly shaking, indicating that she wants to go. Heather glares at her with utter fury at the question. Well, evidently, I need new eyebrow. So, we don't always get what we want, do we? So no. You can't go since we're still busy cooking. Heather yells, causing Beth to look at her in shock. She couldn't be serious. What? You can't do that. Beth yells, not believing Heather would do such a thing. Unfortunately, she is proven wrong as Heather just glares at her, causing the poor farmer girl to flinch. Yes, I can. I am the head chef and you have to listen to what you're told. Heather yells before moving away and slumping over the table. I'm on a team filled with losers. She groans out, face buried in her hands. If she hadn't had her face in her hands, Heather would have seen Beth's shocked and frightened expression rapidly change to utter rage as Beth glared at the mean queen with a glare that spelled death. Confessional, Beth. That's it. I can't take it any more of Heather and her CRP. I'm done listening to her. Beth shouts, her expression reminding the same as before. She was swearing that she'd get back at Heather, but she needed to wait for the perfect opportunity for that revenge to come. She only needs to wait. End confessional. Back with the base. The base boys couldn't help but clap their hands upon seeing Harold walking back into the kitchen, this time in what was assumed the only dry thing he had left, his pajamas. Nice jammies. Duncan says with a smirk while Harold walks past him. This is all I've got left, so if you sickos want to see me but naked, hit me with your best shot. Harold tells the boys with his tone sounding tired and defeated as he spreads his arms out, ready for whatever they had planned next. Please don't. Courtney pleads as she doesn't want to see Harold NDE. She was letting the gazpacho sit as dawn and she were cutting a slice of bread. Well, stop leaving your dirty underwear all over the cabin and we'll back off. Naruto says with a smirk. He had finished straining out the broth into a pot as it was ready while Bridget had finished the pasta and was busy making it. The girls GG in disgust as they finally learn why the boys are torturing Harold and understand everything since that was a disgusting habit. I told you, it wasn't me. Harold once again defends himself while he glares at Naruto. The blonde/redhead only raises his eyebrow at this, finding it ridiculous that Harold was still denying it even though he was the only one in the cabin who wore that kind of underwear, and they had his name on the DMN label. Well, we tried. Duncan says with a shoulder shrug and an eye roll. Naruto looks at Jeff, who has something hidden behind him and sends a wink at the party boy who grins and nods as he walks over to others. Hey guys, I made some sandwiches so we can chow down while we work. Jeff says with an optimistic tone as he has a plate full of sandwiches. Oh wow, thanks, Jeff. It's really sweet of you. Bridget says. Hey, gotta look out for my buds. Jeff says with a smile while he gives the girls and the rest of the dudes their sandwiches but leaves one specific one out. Oh sweet. I'm like, seriously starving. Harold says as he takes the sandwich Jeff had left out. He wastes no time and takes a bite of it. He starts chewing, though, his face instantly grows confused as he chews. This tastes like sweat and lotion and it's probably the worst sandwich ever. He says with his mouth full. The girls were confused as their sandwiches were fine while the boys were busy holding back their laughs. Harold continues to chew while trying to figure out what was his sandwich made out of if it tastes this bad. He chews for a bit before stopping chewing and looks at the sandwich and to his horror, the sandwich had one of his crusty underwear inside of it which now had a bite taken from it. The shock of this causes him to swallow what was in his mouth. Gross. Harold yells before throwing the sandwich out the window and starts spitting out the taste from his mouth while the boys laugh out loud and some of the girls start to giggle. Dude, we'll return all your shorts and patties when you admit your guilt, man. Jeff says as he sets the plate down while Harold just shakes his head. It wasn't me. Harold yells, once again denying everything. This makes the boys raise their eyebrows since they assumed he'd crack by now, but that wasn't the case. They did have to admit, the guy was resilient, but so were they. Are you sure that's all you tasted? Naruto asks with a smirk as Harold looks at him with a raised eyebrow. What? Harold says, wondering what was Naruto on about before he starts to feel a familiar intense burning sensation in his mouth while Naruto just shrugs his shoulders. Oh, just the usual you know. Mayo, lettuce, cheese, crusty briefs, and my special ingredient, diced ghost chili peppers. Naruto yells and grins as Harold's eyes widen before the burning sensation starts to be too much for him. He starts to burn, like really burn, while his face starts to sweat and redden. He quickly starts running to the sink and drinks the water, in hopes that it'd cool his mouth down, but to his disbelief, the water wasn't working. The boys see him continue to drink the water and start laughing once again, prompting Harold to look at them, still drinking. You need milk to neutralize spicy food. DJ says. This causes Harold to stop drinking and rush at them before he goes down to his necks and pleads with them for the milk as his voice was dry. Naruto goes over to a carton of milk at the dessert station and shakes it to see how much was in it, but he feels it was empty and he shakes his head in disappointment. Oh yeah, Eva and Dawn used all the milk. Guess you have to go back to the truck to find some more. Naruto says, and Harold wastes no time bolting out of the kitchen and runs straight to the truck for his cure. While back in the kitchen, the boys once again as Eva looks at them confused. What are you talking about, Naruto? We have another carton of milk right here. Eva says, as she points to another table and it has another carton of milk on it. Somehow, Harold had missed this. Yeah, I know. I just wanted him to go on a chase for it. Naruto laughs while wiping a tear away. He then notices Dawn was giving him and the rest of the boys a stern expression while her arms were crossed. Dawn? Is everything okay? He asks and Dawn pouts, something that Naruto finds cute. You guys need to stop this is getting out of hand. Dawn says. We will, Moonchild, as soon as he finally admits that he's in the wrong, and will stop this CRP. Duncan says, but Dawn wasn't convinced. But still, you need to stop. Dawn says. Courtney walks up to her and places a hand on Dawn's child, making the petite blonde turn to her. Leave them be, Dawn, they're not going to stop until they get what they want. Besides, from what Dave and Harold said, I think was a long time coming. Courtney says, feeling that the boys were justified in what they're doing. She would definitely do the same if she was in the same situation, but much worse. Okay. Dawn says, knowing that she couldn't convince the boys to stop this. She only hoped that they were now done with tormenting Harold. Back with the Gophers. We see Cody panting in exhaustion as he quickly arrives back in the kitchen, with Heather's makeup bag in hand. He sees the others looking at him with confused expressions on why he is exhausted. Guys, be careful when you go back to the cabin. There is a seriously angry hive of bees hanging from the roof to the cabin and I almost got attacked by them when I arrived. Cody explains as he takes a moment or two to catch his breath. But Heather wasn't interested in listening to what he had to say, only what he had in his hands. Whatever, don't just stand there. Give it. Heather demeans, only caring for her makeup bag. Hearing this, Cody just rolls his eyes. Fine, geez. Here you go. Cody says before he tosses the bag over to her. Heather sees the bag flying toward her and she prepares to catch it, when she's suddenly shoved out of the way and hits the table beside her as she looks to see Beth where she was standing and the farm girl catches her makeup bag. Seeing this, Heather quickly sets herself up straight and stomps toward Beth, looking at her with a nasty glare. Give it. Now. Heather growls out to the farm girl who flinches from this. Beth was nearly going to crank when she noticed Lindsay had opened the door to the fridge and she gains an idea in dealing with Heather. She turns to Heather and gives her a glare, which surprises her. "You want it so bad, then go get it." Beth yells before she throws the bag across the room and into the fridge. Seeing her bag fly across the room, Heather rushes after it and follows it into the fridge where it landed and she grabs it. Seeing Heather inside the fridge gives Gwen the perfect idea. She smirks and looks at Lindsay, who was by the door of the fridge, looking confused by what was happening. "Close it." Gwen yells to Lindsay as Heather realizes where she is and what she's done due to a leap in judgment. Lindsay sees what was going on and what Gwen wants her to do. She was unsure of what to do. Yes, she didn't like Heather that much, but doing this would make her angry at her. But she remembers what Naruto had told her days prior, and that had been making her think. Was Heather really a good leader? During this, Heather gets up from the floor and starts stomping toward the fridge door with a glare that Lindsay catches and flinches. "Don't you dare dash," Heather was saying, but was cut off by Beth, who rushed to the door and slammed it shut. "Oops," Beth says with a smirk before she and everyone else start hearing bangs from the other side. "Hey! You can't do this to me. I'm the head chef. I will destroy you." Heather yells, but her voice was muffled by the door. Choosing to ignore the banging and yelling, Gwen gathers the others' attention. "Okay guys, now that the mean queen is cooling off, let's hurry up and win this challenge." Gwen yells, and this rallies the others, as they could finally work without Heather's constant judging and criticism bothering them. The goth turns to Cody. "Cody, go to the medic tent and see if Owen's okay so he can come and help," she says, and Cody nods. "You got it," Cody says before he exits the kitchen and runs to the medic tent to go and get their large teammate for extra hands. It was time to get their team back in action. After all the chaos and antics between the two teams, they reached the deadline with the base having the easiest time as their dishes were complete while the Gophers had to scrap together what they could with the little time they had left. Location: main dining hall. Beth smiles as she sets up her team's side of the table where the two teams would be serving Chris their dishes, with the host sitting at it. She was happy she could do it since with Heather no longer in control, she could do it however she wanted after her team let her. "Your meal is coming right up, sir," Beth says to Chris with a smile while she sets down a ring of flowers before placing her special tiki head in the middle of the flower ring, while on the other side of the table, Naruto was placing 3 flags on the table, a Spanish flag, a Russian flag and a Japanese flag, representing the 3 countries their dishes were based from. "Yeah, everything's almost ready to be consumed, sir," Naruto says before both of the campers return to their kitchen sides to get things rolling. Back in the kitchen, the two teams were busy looking over their dishes and putting the final touches on them. "We just might win this thing yet, you guys," Gwen says with a chuckle as she and Cody take a sniff from their 3 courses. "Alright, let's do this," she says as the rest nod and prepare to exit the kitchen before one turns to Owen. "Owen, you stay here and guard the ribs," she says, and Owen nods. "You got it, Gwen. I'll guard these ribs with my life," Owen yells as he salutes and stands on guard near the ribs, looking out for anything. Back in the dining hall, the base were up after the Gophers had served Chris their pineapple skewers with the host giving them a score of 8. Jeff sets the gazpacho down in front of Chris as Dee, Courtney, and Katie couldn't help but watch a bit intently as the host eats it, especially Courtney as she feels like her family's honor is on the line. Seeing his teammate's nervous expression, Duncan places his hand on her shoulder, prompting the CIT to turn and see Duncan as he gives her a reassuring smile, telling her that it would be okay. She smiles back and turns back to Chris, who stops eating and looks at them. "Your gazpacho passed the testo." 9 out of 10 Chris yells, causing the base to celebrate and the 3 cheer as Courtney lets out a breath she didn't know she realized she was holding as she cheers and hugs Duncan in celebration while the punk hugs back. This goes on for a while before Courtney realizes what she was doing and shoves Duncan away from her and turns around with a huff, crossing her arms. Duncan didn't seem to care as he grins at Courtney before turning back to Jeff, DJ, and Naruto, who all grinned and threw a thumbs up at him. Pass the pasta. The host yells and Naruto walks forward with a large bowl in hand. Hope. You like my family's famous miso chashu pork ramen, you know. Naruto says as he sets down the bowl in front of Chris. The host looks at the bowl in front of him and sees the interesting dish of noodles, broth, pork belly cuts, spring green onion, and various other items in it as he just breaks some chopsticks and takes a large part of the meal and starts eating, slurping all the noodles up to his mouth. His eyes widen before closing them in delight as he swallows and looks at the team behind the ramen. Now this is really good. Chris says with a smile. 10 out of 10 for this bro. He yells and the base cheer. Yes. Ramen for the win as always. Naruto yells, happy that his ramen was good. Chris wipes his mouth and looks at the camera. With the base now at 18, how will the Gophers respond? Chris says before turning to the Gophers as they wait by the SWNGNG door for Owen to enter with their ribs, but for some reason, he doesn't come out, which causes the others to be confused. What the? Where is he? Gwen asks before she walks through the doors to see what was causing the delay. But then. Don't tell me you ate all the ribs and left nothing. Gwen could be heard shouting from the kitchen as everyone was wondering what had happened. But before they could think about what was going on in the kitchen, Owen suddenly pushed out of the kitchen, holding a tray of rib bones as he was covered from face, hands, and body with rib sauce like he had just killed someone. The big guy walks toward Chris with the rib bones while Gwen walks out of the kitchen shortly after, glaring at Owen as he sets down the tray in front of Chris as the host stares at the tray. Yeah, this looks like it's been eaten already. Chris says with an unamused look. Not all of it. Owen claims as he points to a bone where a small piece of meat was still on it. I think there's a tiny chunk left on that bone over there. He says. Chris looks to where he is pointing and sees the piece of meat himself. Yeah, there. Chris takes the bone off the tray before looking at the chunk of meat still attached to it. He rips the chunk off the bone and puts it into his mouth. After tasting and chewing for a second, Chris swallows the meat and looks at the Gophers. You know what? I've had worse. Chris says, making Owen perk up a bit. 3 points. Ooh, so close, Owen. He says, and Owen and the rest of the Gophers slump down at the low score. The base are dominating so far with a score of 19-11. Time for dessert. First up was the base dessert with Chris using a new clean fork to pick up a piece of the medevic they made. He eats the piece and takes a moment to taste it as Dawn and Eva wait for his judgment. Chris swallows and looks at them. Loved what you two did with the honey in this. Chris says and Dawn claps in response while Eva lets out a sigh as she smiles. 9 points. He yells and the base cheer hole going over to the two to congratulate them on their work. Chris looks over at the camera. The base have a final score of 28. So, the Gophers' dessert really needs to step up to the plate with this one. They'll need a score of 17 to tie, 18 to win. Chris says. Lindsay walks up to him and presents their cake as the host couldn't help but admire the dessert. The Gophers had decorated the cake with frosting and fruit to hide what had happened earlier in the kitchen. I have to say, this dessert looks like a winner. He says with the Gophers thinking they still had hope of winning this. Chris eagerly takes his fork and stabs it into the cake and... poof. Only to see the cake practically disintegrate after his fork connected to it with only a small black ball remaining. Oh, that's not good. Cody mutters, now seeing their hopes of winning disintegrate like their cake did. Chris eyes the remains of the dessert with a raised eyebrow, wondering if he should even eat it but knew he had a job to do. So, he picks up the brunt ball with his fork and puts it in his mouth to eat, only to start choking on it, causing panic among the campers. Hang on, there. Owen yells as he was the one to act fast. He picks up the choking host and performs the Heimlich maneuver on Chris and successfully makes him cough up the ball of burntness. Ha ha ha. Yes, got it. The big guy cheers. You. Beth utters in disgust. Chris takes in some deep breaths before looking at the brunt ball. What the hell was that? Chris asks, wanting to know what nearly killed him. It's Heather's recipe. Lindsay quickly explains before she realizes something and gasps. Oh my god, she's still in the fridge. She yells before bolting back into the kitchen, realizing Heather was stuck in there for a few hours. Even if she still felt conflicted, she knew that wasn't safe. Confused by what she meant, Chris looks at the other gophers if they have any explanation. What? She was starting to PSS us off. Gwen explains and Chris lets out an "oh," understanding things now. Oh, I hear that. Chris says, knowing that most of the campers didn't like Heather at all. Tell me about it. Naruto says, someone walks through the SWNGNG doors open from the kitchen and everyone couldn't help but cringe from what they were seeing. Whoa. Oh, the horror. Owen yells as they see Heather standing, shivering violently as her skin has turned completely blue with the thickest drawn eyebrows they had ever seen. Why you guys are SSS so dead? Heather stutteringly yells at the gophers due to how utterly frozen she was. Is it over? She asks Chris, who nods. It is, with the base win 28-12, and it's not just 'cause I almost died, the ribs sucked too. Chris says as he gives the gophers a thumbs down. The base cheer in celebration while the gophers groan in disappointment at another loss while Heather growls. Great. That's just great. Why do we keep losing, people? Anything words I could say could not mention just how angry Heather was right now. Today alone, her eyebrows got burned off, she was locked in a fridge for a few hours and now her team had lost. For the third time in a row. In her anger, Heather looks at the table and sees that her team had gone for a theme she didn't approve of, but then notices the tiki head Beth placed. And what is this? I didn't approve of this. She yells. Everyone then looks at the tiki head on the table, and Dawn's eyes widen in shock as she gasps violently as she sees the tiki head. Wait, that's it. Dawn shouts, pointing to the head. Everyone turns to her and sees her take a step back. That's what I've been sensing. That's what's been cursing your entire team. She shouts. Everyone, even Chris, gasp at this information while Naruto looks at the tiki head. Wait, that's it. Naruto asks and Dawn nods as his eyes widen. Curse. What curse? Heather asks, wanting to know more from Dawn. Ever since we went to Boney Island on that challenge, darkness has been covering your team and it's been only getting worse by the day. And that's the item responsible for the curse. Dawn explains to the gophers as they gasp at this, while Beth particularly winces a bit. I didn't think it would get this bad. Where did you get that from? Naruto asks, looking at Beth as everyone else turns to Beth, who shrinks at all the staring. From Boney Island. Beth slowly says. You what? Heather gasps at Beth. You took that from Boney Island. Chris yells at the braces-wearing girl while slamming his hands down on the table in shock. The deadliest island, Muskoka. The island I specifically said not to take anything from or you'll be cursed. He yells and Beth slowly nods. Yeah. Beth slowly confirms and everyone on the gophers glares at her, now realizing their recent string of bad luck was her fault. I didn't know. I'll put it back. She yells before grabbing the tiki head and bolting out of the mess hall to do what needs to be done. Once she had left, Chris put on his usual smile as he looked at the camera. Alright, looks like the base have the numbers advantage with 9 members staying against gophers with soon-to-be 6 members. And as promised, the winners will be enjoying a reward tonight. A 5-star dinner under the stars. Chris says. All the base jump and cheer in response, with Duncan in particular picking up Courtney and hugging her. At first, Country laughs at this, but soon she starts getting annoyed after a while of Duncan not putting her down. Okay, you can put me down now. Courtney politely says to Duncan, but he doesn't listen and she glares at him. Put me down. She yells. Location, Gopher's cabin. So, who are we voting off? Trent asks as we see him and some of the Gophers sitting outside by their cabin steps, trying to think of who to vote out tonight. He had been filled in on what happened during the challenge and about the curse Beth brought as he was holding an ice pack to his head. We could finally get rid of Heather. We all know she deserves it. Gwen says, crossing her arms since she knew Heather was her top pick of her vote. She'd be happy to get rid of her anytime. Yeah, but there's Beth. She brought the curse onto all of us. Owen says, reminding everyone of who was the cause of all their recent bad luck. True. Gwen says, now feeling conflicted as to who to vote for. She looks up and claps her hands together as if she was praying. Hey Curse, if you're listening, could you please hit Heather next since she deserves it more? The goth asks the curse, hoping it will listen. Meanwhile, inside the girls' cabin, Heather and Lindsay were talking while Heather was applying makeup to her eyebrows, restoring them to their previous state. Heather also had on a hoodie to warm her body after all that time she was in the fridge. You know Lindsay, I could convince the others to vote you off tonight. You were a major traitor today. Heather says with a glare at Lindsay as the blonde bombshell flinches at this. Thinking that Heather could convince everyone to get her kicked off. She opens her mouth, to try and say something but Heather places her hand on Lindsay's chin and lifts her head, to make her look at her. But you did come and let me out of the fridge. So, I'll give you one more chance, if you vote with me tonight. She says and Lindsay quickly nods. Heather lets go of Lindsay and smiles. Good. She says before she turns and processes to exit but stops and turns back to Lindsay. Oh, and if you think about teaming up with the others to betray me, I'll cut off all your hair in your sleep. She says with a happy tone before leaving the cabin, leaving behind a frightened Lindsay who grabs her hair in fear. Confessional, Heather. Today's vote was really strong. Heather says. This was before she went back to the cabin to fix her eyebrows as this footage had her with her skin still blue and her eyebrows were still thick. But only because there were so many annoying people to choose from. Static. Confessional, Lindsay. I can't believe Bet locked her in the fridge. Lindsay says before laughing as she holds her stomach. That was so cool. She yells, continuing to laugh for a bit longer before stopping and looking at the camera with a fearful look. She's not going to hear this, is she? Static. Confessional resume, Heather. Trent's a lame wannabe Kurt Cobain who couldn't help us in this challenge thanks to that fat waste of space Owen who nearly cost us the challenge. Heather begins to rant about her teammates. Gwen's a weird goth who shouldn't be here. Cody's a wannabe playa who we all know won't get a decent girl as his girlfriend and Lindsay's is the typical dumb blonde like the stereotypes see. I have a lot of people on my list to vote off but I only have one in mind. Static. Confessional resume, Lindsay. Her eyebrows look so bad. Lindsay says before laughing again, remembering the horrible eyebrow job Heather gave herself while being stuck in the freezer. I'd kinda want to vote Heather off, but... She says before gaining a conflicted expression. Static. Confessional resume, Heather. I vote for Beth. Heather makes her final decision about who she'd be voting for. Static. Confessional, Owen. Beth. The big guy burps out loudly. End confessionals. Time skip, that night. Location, the bonfire pit. The campfire ceremony. The fire seemed to be burning hotter than usual tonight, which Heather was thankful for, as the Gophers once again found themselves at the campfire ceremony. Chris was standing by his oil drum podium with a plate of 6 marshmallows in hand. I've got 7 Gophers sitting in front of me tonight. But there's only 6 fluffy bits of sweet safety in my hands. Chris says while holding up the plate of marshmallows. So, good luck. When I call your name, come up and get your marshmallow. Gwen, Owen. He says, and the 2 mentioned campers smile and go to get their sweet white treat. Trent, Lindsay, Cody. He says, and the 3 campers let out a sigh of relief before standing up to go grab their safety treat. And with that, there was a single marshmallow remaining on the plate. And the campers without one were Beth and Heather. Heather, Beth. It's down to you. Whoever doesn't get this final marshmallow must immediately walk the dock of shame and board the boat of losers. Chris says as Beth shakes violently in her log with her fingers crossed, staring at the marshmallow while Heather just narrows her eyes at the last marshmallow. The tension in the air was practically visible as the 2 girls never tore their eyes off the treat. The final marshmallow goes to Chris says as he slowly lifts his hand. Beads of sweat start coming down from Beth's forehead while Heather clenches his fist so tight to the point that her knuckles start turning white. The dramatic tension keeps up until Chris points at the last camper who was safe, and it was Heather. Beth gasps at this before she lowers her head in defeat while Heather smiles as she turns to Beth. You heard him. Boat of losers, that away. Heather says with a mocking tone, rubbing salt into Beth's wounds. The mean queen then stands up to go get her marshmallow, but before she does, she sends Beth one last glare. That was stupid of you to take that doll from that island. She says before walking over to Chris. Beth sighs, knowing that Heather was right as she stands and makes her way to the dock of shame, where the boat of losers waits for her. Bye beat. Lindsay says, waving goodbye to her alliance teammate, not knowing she. That's it for tonight. Chris says with a chuckle before he turns to the gophers. And you might want to burn some sage to get rid of any lingering curse vibes. He says. Cool, can Chef borrow us some? Cody asks as Chris just looks at him and laughs. Nope. Chris says, and this gets the gophers to frown at him. So yeah, good luck with that. Go back to your cabin, gophers. I'll see you all in the next challenge. The host says before turning and leaves the bonfire pit. Great. Gwen mutters. Knowing that they were stuck with this curse for who knows how long. The team start to leave the area before 2 people were seen walking toward them. Yo. The gophers stop and turn to see Naruto and Dawn approaching them with Dawn holding something in her hands. The 2 look at the gophers and instantly see someone wasn't with them. Let me guess, Beth. Naruto says as Gwen nods. Yep. Gwen confirms the 2 base thoughts on who they voted off. Well, I thought we'd be good sports and bring you guys this. Dawn says as she steps forward and holds out what she has in hand. To solve your curse issues. She says while holding out a small brown bag. Trent, being the closest, takes the bag from the girl and looks at it. And this is? Trent asks as Dawn looks at him and the rest of the gophers. Sage. Dawn says as the gophers were surprised to hear this. I brought some with me for my mediations. It's the best in ridding unwanted evils. She says. Really? And you're just giving this to us, no catch whatsoever? Gwen asks, voicing the concern of some of the others, as feeling like they were going to own the 2 a favor later, but to her and everyone else's surprise, Dawn and Naruto shake their heads. Yes, I am. I believe you want to continue the competition with no spiritual interference. Dawn says and Naruto nods, agreeing to what Dawn said. Yep, don't feel right to win against others who are cursed. We just want to win fair and square on a clean slate. Naruto says. Wow, thanks you guys. Gwen says, after seeing how sincere the 2 base members were. Don't mention it. It was all Dawn's idea. Naruto says, waving off Gwen's thanks. Before anyone else could thank them, Heather rudely grabs the sage bag from Trent and glares at the 2. If you think this gets you in our good graces, you too are sadly mistaken. Heather says before she turns around and walks away, probably back to the cabin. Everyone else watches her leave with glares or narrow eyes while Dawn, for some reason, just stares at Heather with a sad expression. Trent then turns back to the two base members. Ignore her, we're grateful for this you guys. Thanks for this guys. Trent says, thanking the two once again as Naruto just flashes a grin. No problem, happy to help. Naruto says, and with that, the Gophers quickly leave the bonfire pit to catch with Heather to make sure she doesn't use all the sage for herself. Naruto watches the Gophers leave as he looks at his teammate and sees her expression, which never changed after Heather had left. Hey Dawn, you okay? He asks, and after a little bit, Dawn seems to snap out of her thoughts. Dawn utters as she blinks and looks at her teammate. Oh yes, I am alright. She says as Naruto looks at her. You sure? Naruto asks and Dawn nods. Yes, I was just thinking about something back home, something I miss dearly. Dawn says as she turns back to where the Gophers had gone to, and her expression changes back to the sad one she previously had. Naruto sees this and he has a feeling about it related to the Gophers, or someone in the team. Deciding to push that thought to the back of his mind for now, he pulls in the petite girl for a hug. This catches Dawn by surprise as she looks up at him and he smiles at her. Hey, if you ever want to talk about it, you can come to me and I'll listen, I promise that. Naruto says. Dawn looks at him with wide eyes as she looks into his aura and sees he was telling the truth. Becoming overwhelmed by emotion, Dawn just buries her head into Naruto's chest and returns the hug. Thank you for the suggestion, Naruto. Dawn says as Naruto just smiles and tightens the hug. No problem Dawn. Naruto says, and the two remind like this for a bit. Time skip, a few hours later. That night, at the base cabin. In the base cabin, on the boys' side, Harold was fast asleep, exhausted from the day's challenge and all the CRP the others put him through. Blissing resting. What he wasn't aware of was that the others weren't asleep and were snickering as they were lifting the bunk bed he was on out of the cabin and were carrying him outside during the night, where they would stage the final phase of the lesson. Time skip, the next morning. Harold's eyes slowly open upon him hearing laughter near him. He wakes up and hops out of bed while rubbing his eyes. The laughter he'd been hearing so far grows loud and he reopens his eyes to investigate what was going on. He looks around and notices the girls from both teams are in the lake, swimming, and were laughing at him. Good morning Harold, the girls greet him, momentarily stop their laughing before resuming it. Confused by what was going on, Harold raises an eyebrow before he feels a cold breeze hitting his entire body. He looks down and to his utter horror, he was but naked, with the only item of clothing he had on was his socks and sneakers. Eek! Harold screams out before he grabs his pillow to hide his shame. Fortunately, the viewers at home were blessed by the censored version of this episode. The campers, as usual, weren't so lucky, but this time, they didn't mind this at all, since it was funny. The base boys paddle behind the girls on their canoe while Naruto borrows Bridget's surfboard and paddles beside the canoe due to the amount the canoe could hold. So, learned your lesson yet? Duncan asks, with a smirk. Yes. Okay, yes. Harold yells out, his face beyond red in embarrassment. The boys, however, weren't buying it. We're going to need a lot more than that to be convinced, bro. Naruto yells and this finally causes Harold to break. I'll never leave my crusty underwear out again. Harold shouts, again earning disgusted groans from the girls. I swear. He yells while raising two of his fingers and performing a two-fingered scout salute. This causes the base boys to finally believe him. What do you think, fellas? Believe him? Naruto asks and the guys think about it before shrugging their shoulders. What the hell, I believe him. Jeff says as he reaches into the canoe and pulls out a duffel bag filled with clothes, Harold's clothes to be precise. The party dude tosses the bag to Harold and the nerd catches it, dropping his pillow in the process, and the girls laugh again. Pleasure doing business with you, dude. Harold wastes no time and bolts it to his cabin to get dressed as everyone laughs at this. And with that funny bit, we can close this savory episode of Total Drama Island. 3 days pass since the cooking challenge and we find our campers in the main lodge, having breakfast, and to say that things were normal would be a big fat lie. Gwen was in front of Chef, getting her breakfast as the African Americans served it, which was just a slop of green-brown mash with a straw. Today's breakfast is Hawaiian, Russian, Spanish, and Japanese fusion casserole. Chef says with a smile on his face, feeling proud about his dish. Gwen takes one good look at the green-brown mash and instantly realizes just what it is. You mean leftovers from the cooking challenge? Gwen says with a smirk, but she drops the smirk as soon as she sees Chef giving her a mean looks. Yeah, you got a problem with that? Chef roars at Gwen like a drill sergeant would. No sir, no. Gwen says with a salute, wondering to herself why did she saluted Chef. Chef salutes back with a confused expression on his face. Gwen then drops her hand and walks over to her team's table where she smirks in seeing Heather, who was wrapped in her blanket and was sneezing into a tissue while there was a steaming hot cup of green tea near her diner tray. Need a little echinacea? The goth couldn't help but joke as Heather glares at her. Oh, you're so funny. You think you can just lock me up in the freezer and get away with it? Just wait, I'll make your stay here a living hell. You'll regret you ever met me. Heather says, staring at Gwen with a glare that could have set the goth on fire, but said goth just sits down in front of the mean queen and smirks at her. Too late for that. Gwen says as she takes a bite of her breakfast. Oh, you are so, acho. Heather was saying, but she was cut off by a loud sneeze. She sniffed her nose. Ugh, I hate this place. She yells while blowing her nose into a tissue. Over at the base table, the team were happily eating their food, feeling rather confident in their winning streak against the Gophers, despite it was thanks to a curse Beth brought upon her team. But they felt that they could keep this going. DJ was sitting with his pet rabbit, Bunny, the same rabbit he found during the outdoor challenge. He gently strokes Bunny's head before he takes a sip of his breakfast with his straw and feeds Bunny in a way a mother bird would to its babies. This causes Jeff to raise an eyebrow and Naruto, who had seen what happened while walking towards their tables, to be weirded out by this. I'm glad you're bonding with your pet, but, don't you think you're bonding a little too strong there, buddy? Naruto says, he had 2 trays in hand as DJ turns to him. Nah, we're bonding just great. Ain't that right, Bunny? DJ says. He sees Naruto taking his seat and setting the trays down on the table as he notices one of the trays has fruits on it and realizes who it is for. Saving some fruits for Dawn? The gentle giant asks and the red-hair/blonde rocker nods. Yep. Naruto says as he starts eating/drinking his breakfast. And just where is she? Jeff asks and Naruto nods and swallows his food before speaking. Oh, she said she had to go into the woods and do something there. Naruto says. What he said was true as for the past few days or so, Dawn had been going to the woods during breakfast, lunch, and dinner for a bit before returning. And do you know what she's doing out there? DJ asks and Naruto shakes his head. Nope. I just think she'd either meditate or just talk to her animal friends. Naruto says since that was his honest assumption of what Dawn could be doing out in the forest. Right. DJ says, nodding to his response as he returns to feeding Bunny. Meanwhile, over at the coffee station, Duncan was busy pouring some joe into a mug as he noticed one empty mug near him on a shelf. He looks around to see if anyone is looking at him and once he sees no one was, he smirks and quickly snatches the mug off the shelf and stashes it in his pockets before grabbing his. Just as he was about to walk away, Courtney appeared in front of him with glaring eyes. I saw that. Courtney loudly whispers, not wanting to gain the attention of everyone else, as she was the only one to see what Duncan just did, and this makes Duncan curse at himself for getting rusty. How can you just steal a mug? She asks, wanting to know the true reason why the delinquent would do such a thing on national television. "'Cause it's cool looking and I don't have one." Duncan whispers back at Courtney before he realizes a wording error. He said, "Didn't have one, that is." He says with a smirk as he walks over to base table with Courtney following close behind. "But you might get kicked off," Courtney harshly says to Duncan as he sits down at the table. She wanted to persuade the delinquent to put the stolen mug back before someone noticed it's gone. "Aw, and here I thought you didn't care about me," Duncan says with an amused smirk. Honestly, it was strong for him to believe just how much she was into him, and the more she denied it, the more obvious it was to everyone else. "Look, we have a big numbers advantage against the Gophers. And I don't want to lose because of you going all criminal on us," Courtney says, crossing her arms while looking at Duncan with a stern look, since she doesn't want to lose any time soon. This prompts Duncan to scoff. "Pfft, whatever," Duncan says, rolling his eyes before he looks at Courtney with a grin. "We all know you dig me," he says, and this annoys Courtney. "Ugh, why do I even bother?" Courtney groans out of frustration while also sporting a small blush on her freckled cheeks as she just walks away from Duncan, who watches her leave and takes a sip of his coffee. The CIT sits down at the other side of the table and just plants her face down on the table in frustration as she tries to calm down, but "You know you can't keep denying yourself or your feelings." A voice suddenly speaks, and this causes Courtney to be startled. "Ha!" Courtney screams and nearly jumps off from the table as she looks and sees Dawn sitting next to her, eating an apple. What? Dawn. When did you get here?" The CIT asks since she didn't see the Moonchild sitting there moments ago. "I just arrived," Dawn says as she takes a bite off her apple before she looks at Courtney, and again, "Why are you lying to yourself?" she asks, and this confuses Courtney. "And what are you talking about?" Courtney asks. "Your feelings for Duncan. I can see that you really like him in your aura, so why deny them?" Dawn asks, genuinely wanting to know why is Courtney lying to herself regarding her feelings for Duncan. But this just causes Courtney to get truly annoyed. "Ehaheh." Courtney suddenly let out a loud yet frustrated scream as she felt she was about to rip her hair off her head from all this nonsense of her liking Duncan. She gets up and storms her way towards the exit. "I don't like that idiot," she shouts before exiting the mess hall in a loud fashion, making everyone look at the exit in confusion while Dawn just shakes her head. "Your aura says otherwise. There's no point in lying to me or yourself," Dawn says to herself before taking another bite of her apple. The camera then suddenly shifts to a different location on the island with Chris walking in front of it with a frown. "Hi. Chris, here." Chris introduces himself in a seemingly saddened tone. "Sometimes, teams just don't get along. So, the producer and I thought the best way to work through the group friction would be to exploit it for laughs," Chris says as his face breaks into a grin. "This is gonna be awesome," he says while rubbing his hands together. About an hour after breakfast, the 10 base and 6 Gophers were gathered at the dock with Chris in front of them. So, last week's challenge exposed a few Gophers' issues. Chris starts as he sees Heather glaring at Gwen, and Lindsay with Gwen returning the glare while Lindsay just looks away from Heather. Chris then turns to the base. "And I'm sensing a little funky floating in the base pond," he says as Duncan smirks and lightly nudges Courtney with his shoulder. This makes the CIT glare at him as she shoves him down to the wood they are all standing on. So, this week's challenge is going to be centered around building trust. The host explains as Duncan stands up and straightens out his clothes. He was lucky he had taken his pocketed mug out of his pocket and stashed it back at the cabin, or the fall would have been extremely painful. Because all good things begin with a little trust, the host says with a grin. "Confessional, Gwen. I trusted Trent once. Gwen says, with her arms crossed. He almost left me buried live on the beach. End confessional. There will be 3 major challenges that will have to be completed with 2 or more members of your team. Chris says, this makes some of the campers look at one another while Duncan rolls his eyes as Courtney glares at him, not liking this since there could be a chance she'd have to work with him. But fortune was on her side for once here as Chris smirks. Normally, we'd like to have the campers choose their partners, but not this time. More fun for me and the audience. Now, let's get to the first challenge. The host yells before walking off to the first challenge as the campers follow behind with caution. Confessional, Naruto. Yeah, today's gonna be a long day. Naruto says in a worried tone. End confessional. A little while later, the teams and Chris were gathered up in front of a cliffside. Thankfully, this one wasn't even close to being as big as the main 1,000-foot-tall one on the other side of the island. Okay. So for the first challenge, you'll be doing an extreme freehand rock climbing adventure. Chris explains the first part of the challenge as he points to the wall the campers would be climbing. DJ and Duncan will play for the base while Heather and Gwen for the gophers. The host calls out the 4 willing contestants. DJ and Duncan were okay with being partnered up and voiced no complaints about it. However, Heather and Gwen glare at each other with the latter groaning at being stuck with the former. Chris then pulls out 2 items that everyone would need to use for the challenge. Here's your belay and HRNSS. The host says before throwing the items to the 4 campers with Duncan catching his and DJ's gear and Gwen catching her and Heather's gear, only for the queen bee to harshly take them from Gwen. Hey! Gwen yells at Heather after she takes the climbing gear from her. What's your damage? She asks, glaring at Heather who scoffs. If you seriously think I'm letting you hold me up, you're nuts. Heather yells at Gwen, leaving no room for arguments. Not that Heather would give in to any argument Gwen could possibly dish out. You won't be holding her up exactly. Chris jumped in, causing the 4 to turn to him as he was about to explain the exact instructions of how the challenge would work. One camper pulls the slack through the belay as their partner climbs. If the climber falls, the belay will stop them from crashing. The catch? Both the side and the base of the mountain are rigged with a few minor distractions like rusty nails, slippery oil slicks, mild explosives and a few other surprises. The host points out all of the traps on the cliffside as the campers spot a few. Wicked. Harold says. The person on belay must also HRNSS their partner up, it's all about trust, people. Chris says while looking at the 4. And remember, never let go of the rope. Your partner's life depends on it. Excuse me, can we trade partners? I really don't feel like being dropped on my head today, Gwen asks as she raises her hand while glaring at Heather. The goth wouldn't be surprised if Heather was out to kill her if given the opportunity. And as if knowing what Gwen was thinking, Heather rolled her eyes and scoffed. Please. As much as I love your company, I'm not going to throw a challenge just to kill you, yet. Heather says with no hesitation as she holds up the HRNSS. Now spread M. She tells the goth who just rolls her eyes and spreads her legs open so the queen bee can put on the HRNSS. Never tired this before. DJ says to Duncan who was busy putting on the HRNSS as the brick house looks down at him. Have you? He asks. Oh yeah. They teach you how to climb walls in juvie all the time. Duncan says, making DJ think he was joking but he was telling the truth. He had climbed a few walls before and after going to juvie. Heck, part of his audition tape was him trying to escape from juvie by climbing over the wall with a makeshift belay made out of bedsheets before he was caught by the guards. Just as he fastens the HRNSS onto DJ's waist, Bunny pops up from the brick house's pocket, surprising Duncan as DJ takes the little Lego morph out. Ah, sorry little buddy. Forgot you were napping in there. I can't let you come up with me on this one. DJ says, knowing it was dangerous for Bunny if he were to be with him if he climbs up the cliff. He looks at his team and gains an idea. He walks over to Jeff and holds his rabbit out to the party dude. Yo Jeff, could you watch Bunny for me while I'm on the rock? He asks as Jeff was surprised by this since he was thinking DJ would hand off his pet to Dawn, considering she was the animal lover here but felt happy to help out his buddy. Sure man. No problems. Jeff says and DJ smiles. Thanks, G. DJ says, he was about to hand Bunny to Jeff but he sees Bunny was hesitant and realizes he was just scared of new people. He realizes he has to calm Bunny down. You can trust Jeff, he's my buddy. He says. Bunny looks at him for a bit before turning to Jeff and looks at the party dude for a bit before turning to DJ and giving him a nod, trying to tell him that he'll trust him on this, and DJ smiles before handing Bunny over to Jeff. I'll see you later Bunny. The brick house says before he leaves the two to go and get ready. Jeff watches DJ leave before looking down at his hands and sees Bunny looking at him. Hey there little furry dude. What's up? Jeff politely greets the rabbit. Naruto and Dawn watch this and Naruto can't help but be worried. Do you think Jeff knows what he's doing? Naruto whispers to Dawn so that no one can hear them. I mean, the dude's great and all but, he isn't exactly the responsible type. He whispers. Knowing Jeff's nature since he remembers the stories of Jeff's wild party antics and the results of some of them, or the actions he's done. Don't worry Naruto, everything will be fine. Dawn says, reassuring the rocker that she was perfectly calm and sure that things with Bunny will go just fine. But she could sense some unease from Naruto's aura, so she knew she had to do something. Tell you what, how about we keep an eye on them, just to make sure that Bunny is alright and Jeff is doing a good job? She asks, looking at him and seeing Naruto's expression change from concern to relieved. That sounds like a good idea. Naruto says with a smile and she smiles too. However, the two then notice someone waving at them and they turn to see Lindsay waving at them, but it was aimed at Naruto. Naruto smiles and waves back at the bombshell blonde while Dawn looks at Lindsay and sees her aura. She observes the aura for a bit before noticing something in it that piques her interest. Interesting. Dawn thought, putting her hand on her chin in thought. Meanwhile, over at the Gophers. Heather was just finishing fastening the HRNSS onto Gwen. There, you're all hooked up. Heather says, finishing her task. Gwen looked down at her HRNSS and looked to see if Heather really did put the HRNSS on right and she was surprised to see she did but her eyes caught something new, a second rope which made Gwen suspicious. What's the second rope for? Gwen asks, looking at Heather with narrowed eyes. It's a backup line. Heather simply says with a smile on her face. And once Gwen saw this smile, she realized something was up. What are you smiling about? Gwen asks as Heather just looks at her. Nothing. The queen bee says, with her smile still on her face. I'm just really happy we got to challenge together. She says and this raises Gwen's suspicions. Confessional, Heather. It's all her fault for messing with me. Heather says with a pissed off expression. I've got a doctorate in revenge and humiliation. And I intend to use it here in the challenge. End confessional. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 8. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Pixel's fanbook on fanfiction.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.